So one of the things that I sometimes really struggle with is letting my children down, um, inadvertently. Obviously, it's not deliberate, but there's usually something that I've done which leaves them feeling a bit disappointed. And I always really struggle to know how to handle that. And I'm not quite sure whether there's anything I could do to help them feel better.
Mm.
it's I think it's quite a common one as a parent. I don't think, we're always striving to be the best parents we can be, but inevitably we are going to let our children down at some point, disappoint them, just because life is life. And it might be we've, missed an appointment, or forgotten something, or there's a multitude of things that could be. And I guess it's a really important life lesson for children during their growing up years, that they will
Mm,
have to learn to live with disappointment. Um, I think one of the main things is to just acknowledge it in them, and just sort of say, I can see you're really disappointed, or this, are you feeling disappointed? And they display it differently, don't they? So some children's disappointment might come out as anger, or just withdrawing. So
mm,
then for you as the parent to sort of talk to them about naming those feelings, because depending on the age of the child as well, whether they can actually name those feelings and say
yeah,
why and what it is they're feeling.
yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot depends on the child's expectations. I mean, disappointment is something that happens in everybody's life. Um, and so human beings are designed to cope with disappointment. Um, and I mean, one lesson to be learned in every disappointment is not to count your chickens before they hatch, which many children do. Um, Actually, it's interesting because we were talking earlier about avoidable disappointments and unavoidable disappointments, and whether there was really a difference. If we think about the disappointment as being a loss, because there was an expectation of something, so what's lost is the expected product, if you like. Um, and loss follows a typical cycle, really, with shock and numbness, disbelief, and then we move on to angry feelings and depressed feelings, and then there's a coming to terms period.
Mm,
But in that, there's the anger, as Lisa said, and anger generally needs to be directed outward or inward, doesn't it? Inwardly, it tends to produce a reaction of depression. But outwardly, it's always the parent that will be the target, whether or not the disappointment was avoidable.
mm,
So I think, obviously the best thing is to talk about it, but I think there's a time for talking about it. There's a teachable moment for talking about it. The feelings have to be expressed first. So you just have to put up with that. And the more your child is able to say, I feel very angry because, rather than being angry, the more the easier it is to cope with that. So that's really teaching a child personal development skills that would apply in lots of situations.
mm. I think the thing that's I find really hard is that often the things they get disappointed at feel like really minor, small things. Like as an adult, I'm like, how can you're reacting so extremely in this situation to something that's really not a big deal, and you have to just learn to deal with it. But then I feel guilty because I've kind of, brushed aside how they're feeling and maybe not understood how it feels for them. Does it feel different for them?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I think a child's perception obviously is very different to an adult's perception. And sometimes something that seems really small and minuscule to us is massive in their little world, in their little life. It's huge. So I think never underestimate how, to a child who's perhaps been super excited because, I don't know, maybe it's you picking them up from school, and then suddenly it's daddy picking
Mm,
them up from school.
mm,
But then that can be a massive change and a shift. Although to you, it's just like, well, it's just daddy instead of mummy, or whatever the circumstance. But yeah, so it's kind of their
I mean,
perception.
children's emotional regulation is it's one of the skills you learn as an adult. It's emotionally regulate yourself and manage your emotions. And children are only beginning to learn that especially when they're very young.
mm,
So their expressions are always a bit melodramatic or potentially. But I think the reason you get a massive reaction to a small disappointment, I think there's probably three things behind that, and they can work together. One is simply that the child is low on emotional and energetic sources, and anything will tip them over, because that's one of the things that they haven't learned to regulate, haven't learned to calm down and recover their sort of center. So that's one reason. The second reason is that actually what you're getting is the release of some emotions that are built up. Some anxiety during the day at school, and the child's got all this pent up feeling, and you pick up his pen, and that's it. That's all I need to release all that. So what you're getting is feelings that come from another place and aren't really related to the minor thing. And the third thing is that the minor thing means a lot more to the child than you realize. It's not just a pencil. It's the pencil that was touched by his friend, or that he won, or it means something to the child way out of proportion. It's like a talisman. They've raised the status of that object way beyond its normal value in their minds. We do that as adults too, but it all gets very much more serious as adults. We take our pretenses seriously.
Yeah.
And our delusion.
So when I'm in that situation, what would I do? What's the best thing to do when a situation arises where unexpectedly my child's like suddenly really disappointed about something and I feel very guilty? How can is there anything I can do to avoid those situations arising?
I think
Well,
some things you can prepare for. Sorry, I was just thinking some things you can prepare your child for, and there may be times when you say, look, I'll do my best to blah blah blah. You can kind of prepare them, but there are other times you just can't. And I think it is just that, as Adam said earlier, it's part of their growing up and learning through life, is that sometimes things do happen that are beyond our control.
We come back to this discussion about avoidable and unavoidable disappointment, and the idea that it might be as a result of what we've chosen to do, that there is the disappointment, that the child isn't able to do what they hope to do or get what they hope to get. And I still think, behind that, I mean, we don't deliberately disappoint our children for fun. Even if the decision is that you were going to take them to the park and now you're not going to take them to the park, there's a reason why you've changed your mind. And you can share that with them. So I think the empathic response is to acknowledge their feelings, let them express their feelings. If they express their feelings in ways that are really difficult for you, that's another thing that you want to learn one of the things you need to do is to help your child to express their feelings safely. So that's outside a particular discussion about disappointment.
And being honest as well. I think honesty is really important for children.
So you acknowledge their feelings. You don't deal with their reactivity as if they committed a further offence, making it all their fault, if you like. Now they've shouted. Now you can tell them off for shouting and ignore what disappointed them. No. But when the feelings have subsided, and you're into that stage where they're coming to terms with what's happened, that's the time to offer a new focus, perhaps some sort of compensatory thing, if you can. The promise of a visit at a later date, perhaps. And, in a teachable moment, you can talk about why you had to make the decision you did. And they should be able to understand that.
Yeah.
But parents are the source of all things. If it's not sunny today, your child might be cross with you.
It's also about empathizing with them. I think it's really important to do that sort of tuning in and saying, I can see you're really disappointed about this, or you're really angry about this, or you're hurt, or you're upset, just so that you're not dismissing it. Because I think it's very easy to think, oh, it's not important, and brush it aside, when actually for them, they'll still be caught up in that loop unless you acknowledge it and just say, look, I'm really sorry this happened, or I know how disappointing this is. Acknowledge, so that then they feel heard, they feel listened to. It's like, oh God, she does understand how I'm feeling about it. And then they'll move on. Otherwise, you can often find if you try and do that brushing it aside or moving on or saying, oh, look over here, or distraction, that doesn't always work because they're still caught up in that anger, disappointment, sadness, whatever it is they're feeling.
Yeah. Thank you. That was really helpful, really useful. I've got some good tips there.